When he turned his back from shoulder to shoulder, it looked like as wide as the tailgate of a truck.
And just darkness, literal darkness, just came like all over, just all over me except where I was standing.
This thing let out the most blood-curdling, mind-blowing, spine-tingling scream that you've ever heard in your life, and it cut through me like a knife.
And I knew that they were going to take me. I just knew it. And then the next thing I can remember is being levitated.
Well, when I look in there, I see two big eyes staring back at me.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to the Bump Podcast, a place for the believers of the unexplained, monsters, and paranormal. Join us, and we'll go face to face with what goes bump in the night.
Hi there. My name is Dusty Ruth. I'm an investigator with the BFRO. I'm also a member of the Northern Kentucky Bigfoot Research Group. And I also do investigations for Doug Waller of the Sasquatch group out of Ohio. So I'm here tonight to just talk a little bit about Bigfoot. I first got involved with, my interest, I would say first, took place with Bigfoot when I was little, reading books and watching movies and things of that nature, the thing that usually get most people into it. And then as time went by, of course, I played sports. I also I went to college, which took away some of my time from being as heavily involved in Bigfoot as I would have liked to. But then after my college days were over and so forth, I was able to get back to it a little bit and read more with the books that were coming out. I was always mystified by Bigfoot and thought that I never knew that they were actually in Ohio at that time when I was young, and thought that I would have to go out to someplace like Washington, Oregon, Northern California or something to be able to have a Bigfoot encounter. And then little by little, I once in a while would see an article in the paper or something of that nature of a sighting that had allegedly taken place in Ohio, and that always piqued my interest. I then started going to conferences in different places and stuff and hearing speakers speak. And some of them would be from like around Ohio and around the Ohio area. And they would talk about their investigations and the sightings that had been reported to them in the Ohio area. And then that was really the first that I became aware that there's really a lot of activity in Ohio taking place, and especially in the southern portion of Ohio and the eastern portion of Ohio. And then so I started to really try to soak up anything I could on these Ohio reports and the speakers that were out and doing talks on Ohio, investigations that were being done in Ohio, and of course would grab anything written by any Ohio authors and things of that nature. I had the opportunity, let me go back for a minute. In my career, I was actually an investigator. I was an investigator with a government agency here in Ohio, and was able to avail myself to a lot of training on doing investigations over the years. As a matter of fact, I was required to do that by the state of Ohio in order to keep my license. And so I always tried to sign up and attend the best training that I thought was available at the time. And so then once I got to the point of almost being able to retire, I I decided to, maybe put my skills and my expertise to work in the training that I'd had in doing investigations. So I'd contacted a group that some may have heard of. It was called APE out of Ohio. It was run by a great guy by the name of Dan Baker. And I had volunteered to do investigations for that organization. I did for a while, and then Dan's health became such that he could no longer lead that group. And so at that time, the group just kind of folded. At the time that it folded, then I was contacted and asked by the BFRO here in Ohio if I would like to become an investigator for the BFRO. And so I readily said yes, because I was going to have to find people to go out and do my squatching with anyway. So it was a perfect opportunity for me to join them. So I joined the BFRO and became an investigator for them. Shortly after that, I became involved with the Northern Kentucky Bigfoot Research Group, which is led by Tom Shea out of Kentucky, and became quite active with that group. I also had become good friends with Doug Waller, who runs the Sasquatch group out of Ohio, and have been requested numerous times by Doug to go and do investigations in the southern portion of Ohio and the eastern portions of Ohio. And then I usually do a report and file that back with him. So that pretty much has been my interest and what has led me to being involved in the area of Bigfoot. Through doing that, my first, I'm trying to think, over the years I'd casted tracks and things of that nature with one group or another. But my first opportunity to have a sighting of Bigfoot was actually just a couple years ago. I was one of the leaders on a BFRO expedition here in Ohio and was leading a group. We were out sitting actually in a circle, and I placed everybody in a circle because of having formerly read a book by Robert Morgan. If you've never had a chance to read that book, you ought to read it, because it's a great book written by a great individual. But it suggested doing that. So I had everybody sitting in a circle, kind of looking over each other's back. That way we could sit around and we could talk and things of that nature. And if there was any Bigfoots around, they wouldn't really know that we were watching for them, because we were actually sitting there looking at the individual across from us, but at the same time looking behind them into the woods. We did have night vision. We had thermals and things of that nature while sitting in the group. I think there was about 7 of us. While sitting there, we began to get pelted with acorns and little small walnuts. At that time, it was, and I'm trying to think, it was about the end of May, first of June, maybe something like that. The walnuts were still kind of small, maybe about the size of a nickel, I'd say, maybe not as big as a quarter, maybe between a nickel and a quarter. But anyway, something was pelting us with these acorns and small walnuts. And so that got our attention real quick. Shortly after that, one of the individuals kind of sitting across from me was using a thermal and happened to kind of get excited and shouted that they saw one. I sat there and told them to, just kind of calm down, don't frighten it off. I wanted everybody in the group to have a chance to see this thing if we could. So I just kind of calmly asked him where this thing was that he was seeing, and he then informed me that it was behind me. At the time, he didn't say how far away it was or anything of that nature. So I'm sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, Bigfoot behind me. I don't want to jerk around real quick and look to see where it's at or what it's doing or anything. So I just kind of calmly, told everybody if they had their thermals or night vision to look behind me, and that I would get up in a few minutes and kind of walk to the other side of the circle, and that I would look also. Well, each time that they would say that they were seeing it or something like that, I then got up and tried to get myself in position where I could see it also, but I couldn't see it. I was looking through my thermal, and every time I looked through the thermal, I couldn't see anything. So this went on for quite a while, and then finally, on one of these occasions when they were saying they were seeing it, I was able to get my thermal up and see it also. It appeared to me to be small, to possibly be a juvenile. It was behind a tree. When I looked, it actually, at the time, we were also hearing sticks breaking, and still we're being pelted with acorns and the small walnuts and stuff. And so we felt like there's possibility that there was more than one around us, because the one that we were seeing couldn't be making all the noise and the breaking of the sticks and stuff, because like I said, it literally seemed like we were surrounded. Excuse me. So anyway, when I looked and saw the thing, within about a second or two, I then ended up seeing it down, like it was on the ground looking around the tree. I honestly can't tell you whether that was one that had dropped down and then was looking at me from the ground, or whether it was actually two, and the first one had ducked behind the tree and the second one popped out, down around the ground. I just can't say. I can only say that the two things I was seeing were similar in looking through the thermal. They looked to be about the same size and stuff. So I kind of assumed that it was just one, and that when I started looking at him, he then dropped to the ground, hoping maybe that I wouldn't be able to see him. But I couldn't swear to that, whether it was one or two. Then a little bit later, before we got ready to pack up and leave at the end of that night, either it or another one had thrown a rock. I was driving a Kawasaki Mule at the time, didn't have a top on it, and it was parked there not too far from where we were sitting. And at the time, I didn't realize, but this rock hit, and it hit quite loud, and it almost to me sounded like somebody had an armload of boards and had them stacked in their arms, carrying them, and had just dropped them all at the same time, as it, made a loud crash when it hit the ground, and then seemed to rattle some. Well, it's a while. I kept thinking about this for like a week or so, as to what that could have been that made that noise and stuff. And then it finally dawned on me that I thought it could have been a rock landing in that mule and then bouncing around in there, kind of ricocheting off the metal. So a friend of mine had one about the same size and same style, I'm going to call. And so, excuse me, they went out with some rocks of different sizes, small, medium, large, and experimented a little bit, throwing the rocks into this. It was a four-wheeler, actually, I think, and it made then the same sound. That person was Lori Russell, was with us that night when we were out on the expedition, and she said that it sounded exactly like what we had heard that night. So, putting two and two together, we figured that that's what happened, that one of them threw a rock into this Kawasaki Mule. To our knowledge, it was the only rock that was thrown all night. I think the rest of them were all acorns and walnuts that were thrown at us. But that was my first encounter with actually having seen one. And then it was just about a week later, I was out with the group down in Kentucky, the Northern Kentucky Bigfoot Research Group that Tom Shea has. and we were camping down there, and a group of where most of them had either fallen asleep or were sitting around the campfire talking, and I was over at the edge of our base camp sitting underneath a canopy kind of keeping watch, and I decided that it was getting a little chilly, and so I thought, well, the best thing for me to do is reach over and grab my sleeping bag, cover up with it, not get in it, but cover up with it. But I was kind of afraid that if I did that, I would start to get warm and probably would doze off and fall asleep. So it was about 2 o'clock in the morning. I decided that, okay, if I'm going to cover up this sleeping bag, I better go ahead and just kind of scan the perimeter one more time, just in case I did fall asleep. So I started over to my right, and with my thermal again, started scanning around. And when I got to about my 10 o'clock position, I saw something sitting out. I couldn't tell at the time because the thermal made everything look smaller than what it was, and it looked farther away than what it was. But I saw something that appeared to be kind of shaped like they describe a Bigfoot being shaped like, kind of broad chest, broad shoulders, kind of conical head. And I saw it sitting out to about my 10 o'clock. So I started watching it. And as I said before, I think it was about 2 o'clock in the morning when I started doing this. And I watched this thing for a half hour. Wow. And it didn't move. It never made a movement of any kind. So I kept watching, and finally I decided, well, I'm going to holler for Tom Shea, and get him over there and get his opinion. So I hollered back there at the fire because he was over there talking to some individuals over there. And I said, Tom, I said, come over here and take a look at this a minute. So he come over and he got out his night vision, started looking. And I told him, I said, it's over there about my 10 o'clock. But I said, I've been watching it for a half hour. And if it's a Bigfoot, I said, that thing has not moved. I said, I've watched it. And I said, I thought maybe it was just my imagination that something else is out there, that's giving off some heat, and I'm misinterpreting it to be a Bigfoot. Well, Tom lifted up his night vision and started looking. About that time, it did move, and it started the stuff that you hear, the kind of the swaying back and forth from side to side, and then it quickly started crawling from the position where it was at. Well, I didn't know it at the time because it had been dark out there. But the next day, when it became light, we went out and looked for tracks and where this thing was, and trying to measure distances and stuff. And it was actually sitting, or had been sitting or leaning in a dry creek bed. And there, at the edge of the dry creek bed, was a rotted stump that it was actually behind. And so that's why I could only see it from like the top of the chest up, was because the rest of it was behind the stump and down in this dry creek bed. But anyway, it started crawling up behind a couple trees. And when it did, it actually started getting off a much brighter white hot signature. I did have my thermal set on white hot. I think it's easier for me to see that way. I can usually pick up things easier. But anyway, it crawled up behind these two trees, and as it was crawling, it was glowing pretty bright. And it got up behind those two trees and stayed there behind them for a while. And then by that time, some of the other members of our group, John Gregory Jarozovich and Ben and Rich Taylor, had heard kind of commotion, me and Tom talking about seeing this Bigfoot and stuff. So they came over and quickly got out their thermals and started watching also. And it stayed behind the trees for a few more minutes, and then it crawled up behind two more trees. And each time that it was doing this, it was getting closer and closer to us. And so then it got up behind these other two trees, and we watched for it And finally, it came back out again and started crawling up behind one tree. Again, not knowing how close that tree was. The next day, we found out it was about 30 to 40 feet away from us.
Oh.
And then it crawled behind that tree, and we never saw it again. Well, at the time, we didn't know it because it was dark, but running directly behind that tree was a dry creek bed. And so my belief is that as it was crawling up behind that tree, it crawled down in that dry creek bed. And we had thought that it somehow stayed behind that tree and then was able to elude us some way getting out from behind that tree. But I don't think it ever was actually up behind the tree. I think it crawled down in the dry creek bed directly behind the tree and then got away that way, just crawled out the dry creek bed. So that was my second actual sighting of what I thought was a Bigfoot. So that was pretty interesting. And then through my years of being involved in investigations of Bigfoot and stuff, I've also become quite interested in audio and also fingerprinting of possible Bigfoot prints. So I started fingerprinting anytime that I felt like they had left prints on vehicle windows or vehicles. I also, when I get, if it's a fairly active area, I put out what I call a long duration recorder, and I'll set it to record every night from about 9 o'clock p.m. to 7 o'clock a.m. And I'll let that thing run for 30 days or so before I change out the SD card and the batteries in it. And then, if I'm getting good audio, I let it go again. And I'll have anywhere up to maybe 7 recorders out at a time. So I'm actually recording 70 hours of audio every night. And then I have to, of course, upload those to my laptop, and I run them through Audacity and try to look for visual signatures in there, whoops and howls and maybe knocks and things like that, rock clacks that they're doing. And I break those down then into clips and save them.
Man,
So it keeps me busy.
Yeah, I'd say so. 70 hours.
Yeah,
a day for 30 days.
Yeah, a lot of time is invested in doing that, and of course, I don't get all that done in one day. I don't get it all done in 1 week. I get done as much as I can, and then when the winter months come on, usually I'll pull my recorders and bring them in to kind of refurbish them, repaint. I paint them in the containers that they're in camouflage colors, and just check them over, make sure the mics are still good, everything's working properly and stuff to get them ready to go for the spring again. And then I spend the winter, trying to catch up on some of my audio.
Man, but does it? You unloaded 2 major sightings right there back to back, man. I got some questions. I've already written like a whole page of notes. I don't know if you can see it or not. But,
fire away, brother.
That first encounter you're talking about, you guys were sitting around each other, like a circle, like a,
yes,
like a camp circle. And when you started getting those nuts thrown at you, do you think that maybe they were throwing those nuts as a distraction for you to look away long enough for this juvenile to escape? Like maybe they.
I really think that they were just doing to mess with us. If they'd wanted to hurt us or anything, they would have thrown larger and would have thrown them harder. This thing, if it wanted to, had plenty of opportunity to get away. And he didn't want to get away. He wanted to play with us and mess with us, and was more interested in what we were doing. And as a matter of fact, there's a trail right there where we were at the trailhead, and a couple of our members had looked up the trail and saw eye shine. And course, we don't know whether it was the same Bigfoot or not, or it could have been a different one. But this individual had plenty of opportunity and could have easily gotten away had it wanted to, because all it had to do was continue going back into the trees from where it was located, and it could have got away easily. So it wasn't wanting to get away.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's,
yeah, it was doing it more than an effort. It was throwing those things more than an effort just to see what we were going to do.
yeah.
Because I don't even believe it wanted us to leave, because had it wanted us to leave again, it would have thrown them harder. It probably would have thrown some rocks, broke some branches, knocked down a tree, things of that nature.
Yeah. Oh, I think I lost you there for a second. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's back again. Yeah.
All right. Cool.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah. I can hear you good
Okay.
now. Yeah. It was giving me a warning that your bandwidth was looking low, and then it just blinked out for a second. It's good.
Okay.
Yeah. So you were there. If it wasn't trying to get away, and if it is a juvenile, I've heard a lot of reports that, they're super curious, that they like to be around people. They're just as curious about us as we are them, I guess.
Yeah. And I really do believe that that's what was going on, that it was just wanting to see what we were going to do. It was we were its entertainment for the evening. And like I said, I don't believe that it meant us any harm at all. It didn't want to chase us away, because there's a lot of other things that it could have done, if it wanted to do either of those.
Yeah.
It was just, like I said, it was playing with us.
Well, I'm glad.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Me too.
And you said about a week later, you had a visual of one
Right.
in a dry, like it was in a dry creek bed.
Yeah.
You mentioned that it was crawling. What did it look like when it was crawling? Did it get down on all fours, or did it do that spider crawl type?
Well, it really didn't do what you would call the spider crawl. I've seen people who have drawn pictures of what they look like when they're doing the spider crawl.
Yeah.
And it really didn't look like that. This thing was actually kind of down on all fours. And I'll tell you what, if I had to describe maybe a position that it was in or something, it appeared to be crawling more like a frog. I mean, its feet were kind of splayed out in the back.
Yeah. And
it was up on its toes. And then the two hands, the one hand was spread out, just like you would do if you were, hands, knees on the ground and had your fingers on the ground. The left hand that was actually spread out like it was supporting its weight. Its right hand was actually doubled up in a fist, and it had something. Obviously, I can't say whether the object that it had was sharp or not, because I had pointed. And it too gave off a heat signature.
Wow.
Now, whether it was, a bone that had been broken and sharpened, or whether it just naturally was pointed on the end because of the way it broke, could have been a bone of some kind, could have been a stick that it had been using to dig with. I don't know. Only thing I can say is it had something in its hand that it had it clutched in its fist, and it was pointed on the end.
Oh, that's absolutely frightening.
Yeah. Well, and without knowing what its intentions were, it can be discerning, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Only thing I can say is it was there. It was in its hand.
And this one was progressively moving closer and closer to you guys.
It was moving closer and closer, but at the same time, we weren't afraid or anything, because again, it just seemed like it was kind of playing a game with us, like it was wanting to see how close it could get. Yeah. It didn't try to do anything. It didn't throw anything at us. It didn't try to break any tree branches or trees to frighten us away. Again, it just seemed like it was playing a game like it was trying to see how close it could come up to us. And the wild, had it meant us against some kind of harm or something, it's hard to tell how long it sat out there behind that stump before I actually saw it. That thing might have been sitting out there an hour or two. It could have easily gotten down. It could have crawled the same way that it crawled before, or it could have got down in that creek bed and been right up on us without us even knowing it. But it just seemed to be sitting out there observing us, watching us, see what we were doing. And then once it realized that we were watching it and seeing it, then it started this little game of crawling up from tree to tree to get closer.
Wow.
Yeah. So again, not one time did any of us ever have the thought or concern that it was out to harm us in any way.
Yeah.
It just didn't act like it.
Right. Well, let me ask you this, and I was, like I said, I've talked to a lot of people from BFRO, and I ask everybody, but I especially like to hear the responses from the BFRO guys, because it seems like members of BFRO are more of the flesh and blood crowd.
Right.
They stick inside that camp.
Yes.
Like you personally, do you take into consideration any reports you get that might be a little woo factor or orbs or anything?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. What I tell everybody is my personal belief right now is that they are some flesh and blood creature, but I keep an open mind. I don't disregard anything anybody reports to me, and I'm always open to my mind being changed based upon the evidence that's presented to me.
Yeah.
And if somebody reports to me that one was sitting 4 feet away from them and just magically disappeared, that's what I put in my report. I don't try to sugarcoat or doctor their statement in any way or anything. I don't care what organization I'm involved with. I put down exactly as it was reported.
Man, I love that.
I honestly have to say, in some of these cases, I just don't know, and I have to say I don't know.
Yep. Yep. I love that answer, man, because I would hate for anybody to be completely disregarded because it's something that somebody's uncomfortable with hearing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right.
So
no, like I said, I don't disregard anything anybody reports to me. I put down, exactly what they say, and I don't know. Like I said, maybe a year from now, 6 months from now, 5 years from now, my mind may be changed. And I'm open to that if that happens. But I want it to be based on evidence. So
that's the best kind of investigation work there is, and as long as you're staying open, I think that's a wonderful thing. That puts you in at a higher tier of professionalism in my book.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I try not to come into any kind of investigation with any preconceived notions of what's happened or an explanation to something. I just take what they say and I go out and I look for evidence to either support the report that they made or to prove, I guess, that the report as they were telling me could not have taken place as I was told. But whichever direction the evidence leads is, that's what goes in my report.
Good deal, man. Well, speaking of your reports, how busy are you guys? Do you cover a large area yourself? Are you getting a lot of reports every week?
I'll tell you what. Yeah. I live in the southern part of Ohio, and we get a lot of reports down in this area, a lot of activity taking place. I know Doug Waller with his Sosby group, they get a lot of reports down in this area. And there just aren't, there are not a lot of investigators in the southern portion of Ohio.
Yeah.
I know with the BFRO, for years, it seemed like most of the report reports that were being investigated were up in the eastern or the northeastern portion of Ohio, but that was also the area where most of the investigators lived. So they took reports, that were nearer to them or near some hotspot area, and consequently, those are the ones that you see when you go on the public BFRO website. I end up with a lot of reports simply because again, there aren't as many, say, BFRO investigators in the southern portion of Ohio. I do a lot, if not most, of the investigations now for Doug's group that are reported out of the southern portion of Ohio. Of course, with Tom's group in Kentucky, we really don't. If he gets a report of something taking place in Ohio, he'll contact me. But most of the reports that we investigate and look into are in the kind of the northwestern Kentucky area around Trimble County.
Okay.
But yeah, we get a lot of reports. It keeps us busy. Kind of comes and goes. More reports at certain times of the year than there are at others. But
do you think that might be because they're migrant?
No, it just kind of, I guess, goes inside.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. If it kind of comes and goes, do you think that these creatures might be migratory?
I'm open to that. I really can't say that they do. Although, let me put a couple qualifiers on that.
Mm-hmm.
One, I have had recorders out in areas that are very active, and have left the recorders out all winter. In areas where I get
hold on a sec. I'm having a hard time hearing you. Hold on.
Occasional knock or something like that, but nothing to the magnitude that I would have during the warmer months.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, one of the things I wonder about, I hear some people say that they think that they migrate and things. Well, my answer to that is, okay, well, if that's the case, how far do they migrate?
Hey, Dusty, hold on just one second. But my internet's acting up.
Below us. And the fact that live in, let's say, Upper Michigan or Wisconsin, some of those states, they would be walking down to Ohio. And that just doesn't appear to be true as far as the recorders that I've left out in the wintertime and stuff, because if that is the case, they're not as active for some reason. I do know that some people believe that they live in or that they may migrate to caves and old mines and things of that nature, and maybe there's some truth to that. I also know that some people claim that, well, if they were living in an old mine, some of the gas from the mines and things. And so I'm still open to the possibility that maybe they do go to places where there's caves and mines, but yeah, I honestly don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's anybody's guess, really, but
yeah, at this point, I don't think we've proven it one way or the other, whether they do migrate or not. Like I said, maybe they do.
Yeah.
I can say this, that in the wintertime, according to the research I've done with my recorders and stuff, in the wintertime, that if they don't leave the area, for whatever reason, they're not as active. They're not knocking on trees and
and doing rock clacks.
Rosie, I'm having a hard time hearing you. I think my internet's acting up. Hold on just 1 second for me. If you can hear me, hold on just 1 second.
I can hear, yes.
All right, man. I'm sorry about that.
That's okay, no problem. It gave me a chance to get a drink.
I have, I don't mind putting them on blast. I have Frontier Communications for internet around here. I'm in Southern West Virginia, and man alive, it's the worst internet. I have 30 meg of internet at the highest in my house.
Wow.
You know, I got Russ Jones. He lives 45 minutes from my house, and he has like a gig. You know.
Jeez.
So, you know, if we turn on a microwave here, my internet goes out. Like seriously.
Oh wow.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Yeah, but as far as migration goes, you know, I think, well, I don't really have much to go off of on this, but I feel like, you know, a lot of animals, they'll change in elevation, you know, so maybe Southern Ohio, West Virginia, you know, Kentucky, Tennessee, you know, maybe they're, you know, maybe they're going into the hills and out of the hills, you know, in the hills and valleys throughout the seasons. But
well, like I said, right now I'm open to anything because I haven't been able to prove, as far as migration, I haven't been able to prove it one way or the other. Right. I can just say that in my areas in the southern portion of Ohio, the places I do research, it appears that they're not as active during the winter. Yeah. And now you can take that for what it's worth, you know, could be for a variety of reasons. Yeah. Maybe they are. Maybe they're still there and just not doing all the wood knocks and the rock clacks.
Maybe, you know, the rock clacks interest me too, because, you know, I hunt every time I get an opportunity to, you know, in deer season. And, yeah, there's a lot of times I'll hear like, you know, it's not a wood knock, but I'll hear what sounds like two rocks clacking together, but it doesn't sound like just a rock. It sounds like a boulder falling or something, you know, but it's like, how many boulders could there possibly be on top of this mountain? You know, for me to hear it every time I go out, for it to clack one good hard time and then stop.
I've heard the wood knocks. I've heard rock clacks. I've heard what appears to be rocks against wood or against a tree. And I've also heard there's a couple places where I put out recorders that I believe that the number of times that they knock and clack has a meaning. Yep. I believe the tone with which they do the knocks and clacks means something also. I believe also the tempo, you know, how fast they do them means something else. I have actually heard them do what sounds like it sounds like a hollow knock, like they're hitting a piece of hollow wood against another piece of hollow wood. Yeah. And I've heard it answered back with the same sound. So again, I believe that means something and doesn't mean the same thing as if you're doing the home run knock against a tree.
Yeah. That's very interesting. And
yeah, I think all those different tones and rhythms have a different meaning, but at this point, I don't think any of us can tell you what they are. I've seen people guess at what they mean or say that this is what they mean, but I've heard, I couldn't tell you how many different explanations for one knock against a tree, what that means. I mean, there's as many theories out there as there are people doing research, I believe.
Probably. You know, I've had the thoughts even of as far as knocks go, you know, how a gorilla will hit its chest, you know, as like an aggressive kind of behavior or whatever. And it, if you listen to it, it's almost like a higher tone, hollow sound. Yeah. It doesn't really sound like a thump, thump, thump.
Yeah. Well, and I've recorded one clapping, and you can tell it's walking toward my recorder and it's making a sound. I can't say that it's clapping, because I'm not there to see it.
Right.
But it sounds like it's clapping its hands as it walks closer to my recorder.
Wow. That is wild. Is it now all this is in Southern Ohio?
Well, not all of it. Most of my recorders are in Southern Ohio. I have had recorders out in the northern part of Kentucky at times. I've also had some recorders out in the southern part of Kentucky at times.
Okay.
But all those have taken place. I'm trying to think to make sure that I'm not telling you something's not true. All of them have either been a Southern Ohio or northern or southern part of Kentucky.
Deal. All right, I just got one more big question, and it's 100% your theory on this. What do you think that we're dealing with here? Is it a wood ape? Is it a species of mankind, or what? Where do you fall at in this whole personal beliefs about Bigfoot?
Well, I don't know, to be honest with you. I think that it's, some people say it's an undiscovered primate. I do believe it's a primate. Whether it's undiscovered or not, a lot of people have seen them. A lot of people have researched them. Most of the scientific community at this point is unwilling to accept the evidence that's presented or brought forth regarding these creatures. But I can't say that even really that they're undiscovered, because that's not true. People have discovered them. It's just that the scientific community largely is unwilling to accept the evidence that they've been presented. I don't know. Right now, I guess my belief is that somewhere back along the line, thousands of years ago, that somewhere somehow there was a union or joint union between a human and either an ape or some type of I guess relic hominin of some type, and that brought about Bigfoots, I guess.
Yeah.
It just depends on, I guess, again, what evidence and what researchers you believe as to where these creatures come from. And, there's a portion of people out there that think they have come in spaceships. There's a group of people out there that believes they're part of the Nephilim from the Bible. At this point, I just have to say I'm not smart enough to know.
Well, I love that, because nobody can know yet. And
no, I think that someday, whether it's in this life or the next one, that it'll all be revealed to us. But at this point, it's just not. I guess the good Lord doesn't have intentions of telling us at this time what they are. So we keep researching.
There you go, man. That's a perfect answer. When it's our time to know, we'll know, right?
Yeah, that's it. And I may not know in this lifetime, and if that's the case, I'll keep trying. But I'll just have to accept that, I guess.
That's a good way to look at it, man. Well, Dusty, is there anything else you want to cover, or you want to let the audience hear how to contact you in case they have their own report that they want?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, they could. I'm on Facebook. If you look me up, it's Dusty Ruth. I live in the southern portion of Ohio, actually Washington Courthouse. You'll see me pictured there with my red Jeep Wrangler. They can also get a hold of me by sending me an email. Email is Dusty. It's DUSTY RUTH. That's my last name, Dusty Ruth. The numeral 1 at gmail.com. So it's Dusty Ruth 1 at gmail.com. They can contact me that way too. Just tell me that they heard me on your podcast and that they wanted to talk to me about a situation with Bigfoots, and I'll be glad to give them to contact them
whether that be via email, whether it's via Facebook, or if they want to include their phone number, they can do that, and I'll call them.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dusty. I really appreciate you doing this. I know it's the night before Thanksgiving when we're recording this, and everybody's trying to scramble to get stuff ready. You know, my wife's making pecan pie right now, and I got to go make deviled eggs. So I appreciate you taking the time for me tonight, man.
I'm glad that I had the opportunity to do this. And I would encourage everybody, if you get a chance, you might get on Facebook and look up the Northern Kentucky Bigfoot Research Group. Again, it's Tom Shea's group. And just ask to join that group if you would. It's a very knowledgeable group. They post stuff on there all the time about current events and also some of the investigations that we're doing, and a lot of things involving tracks and casts and hairs and things like that.
Nice.
So if you do have an interest in Bigfoot, you might reach out to Tom's group and join through Facebook.
Good deal, man. I'll try to find that and put a link to it in the show notes too. That way people.
I greatly appreciate that.
That way people can find it for you. All right, man. Well, Dusty, thank you so much again, and have a happy Thanksgiving. And,
all right, you too.
And I'll talk to you through email soon.
All right, thanks for having me on.
All right, thanks, brother.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.